The Galactic Council had gathered once again, but this time, something was different. The atmosphere inside the massive chamber was thicker, charged with a nervous energy that hadn't been present in any previous meeting. Representatives from over 50 different species filled the high seats, their eyes flickering with curiosity, suspicion, and even fear. Normally, such assemblies were filled with endless debates about trade agreements, border disputes, or the balance of power. But today, the agenda was singular and unsettling: the humans. Just a few short decades ago, humanity had been nothing more than an insignificant speck on the map of the galaxy, a young race struggling to make its mark. Now, the Galactic Council could no longer ignore their rapid rise, and it was all because of a single revelation: a ship. The humans had built something that had left the galaxy's most powerful civilizations stunned. And it wasn't just any ship. It was a marvel of design, unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Its name, Eclipse, had already begun to spread like wildfire throughout the galaxy, whispered in tones of both awe and fear. The Council had learned of it only recently, and despite their most advanced intelligence networks, they had been unable to understand it fully. They had no idea how it was built, what powers it possessed, or even what kind of materials were used. All they knew was that no ship in the galaxy, no matter how advanced, seemed capable of standing against it. The chamber was quiet, the tension palpable as the holographic image of the Eclipse flickered to life in the center of the room. A few counselors leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the display, studying the sleek black ship. At first glance, it looked almost like any other ship, sleek, well-designed, but nothing that would give the most advanced civilizations pause. But as the hologram zoomed in, details began to reveal themselves. There were no visible weapons, no energy signatures, no exhaust vents. It was smooth, almost organic in its design, as if it had been carved from the very fabric of space itself. It didn't look like a ship, it looked like a force of nature. Captain Elena Cross, the human leader behind this technological marvel, stood at the back of the room. Her face was calm, her posture straight, but her mind raced. She knew what was coming. She had always known. The Eclipse had been created to send a message not just to the Council, but to the entire galaxy. Humans had always been seen as a threat, an unpredictable species whose potential for chaos was as great as their potential for greatness. The galaxy's most powerful races had spent decades trying to suppress humanity's rise, dismissing them as unimportant, too young to understand the intricacies of galactic politics. But now, the Eclipse had changed everything. Elena had been chosen to lead this project because of her understanding of the human spirit. The Eclipse was more than just a ship. It was a symbol of what humans could achieve when pushed to the edge, when their backs were against the wall. It was not just about advanced technology, it was about the audacity to challenge the laws of physics, the bravery to face down the most powerful beings in the galaxy and say, "We are here, and we will not be ignored." As the council members exchanged nervous glances, the debate began. Some were quick to voice their concerns. This ship could upset the balance of power, one of the Zerovian representatives warned. If humanity can build such a ship, what else might they create in the future? It could be the beginning of an arms race, one we can't win. Another counselor, a member of the Lither species, frowned. What do we truly know about this ship? We've only seen its exterior. What powers does it possess? We cannot afford to make assumptions. The arguments raged on, with no clear consensus emerging. But the humans remained silent, their representatives watching as the galaxy's elite debated the implications of their very existence. Elena Cross knew that the time for talk was over. It was time to show them the power of the Eclipse. Finally, the Council's leader, a being of shimmering light from the Aetherians, called for silence. The chamber quieted, and all eyes turned to him. His voice echoed through the room, smooth and authoritative. Enough! We will see for ourselves. Captain Cross, we have agreed to your request for a demonstration. Your ship will be tested. Prove to us that it is more than just a bluff. Elena's heart skipped a beat. She had anticipated this, but now that it was happening, the weight of the situation hit her. This wasn't just a test of the ship, it was a test of humanity. The eyes of the galaxy would be upon them. One misstep, one flaw, and everything could come crashing down. A hush fell over the room as the projection of the eclipse vanished, replaced by a series of star maps and coordinates. The challenge had been set. A demonstration would take place in the HFY system, on the outskirts of Council-controlled space, where no distractions or outside forces could interfere. The location was chosen for its isolation far enough from any civilization to ensure safety, but close enough to allow the Council members to observe up close. The humans would show their ship in action, and it would either prove to be a force of unimaginable power or a dangerous weapon waiting to be exploited. As the meeting adjourned, Elena stood motionless, the weight of the galaxy's gaze pressing down on her. She had never felt such pressure before. The eclipse was her responsibility, and it represented everything humanity had struggled for. It was a symbol of survival, of defiance. But she knew that the next few days would determine whether humanity would rise as a dominant force or be crushed under the weight of the galactic powers. She turned to her crew, waiting outside the chamber, their faces serious. The eclipse was ready, but now Elena realized it was more than just a ship, it was humanity's future. And it would either confirm their place among the stars or it would burn them out of existence. The HFY system was eerily quiet. A silent expanse of empty space, its distant stars barely visible against the vast blackness. This would be the arena, the place where the fate of humanity's place in the galaxy would be decided. Captain Elena Cross stood on the bridge of the eclipse, staring at the dark void in front of her. The stars were small and cold, flickering like tiny pinpricks of light in an ocean of darkness. She could feel the weight of the moment settling in her chest, every breath sharp, every heartbeat thundering in her ears. Today was the day humanity would either prove its worth or be cast aside. The crew was ready. They had trained for this moment for months, perfecting every maneuver, every calculation. But nothing could prepare them for the eyes of the galaxy that would soon be upon them. From their position, they could already see the vast fleet of council ships waiting in the distance. A collection of war cruisers, transport vessels, and observation ships from various species, their weapons systems at the ready, though they hadn't yet been activated. They were here to observe, to test, to judge. The Council's leadership, sitting in their own ships far off in the background, would be watching every move closely. The eclipse had to show them its power, and it had to do so in a way that left no room for doubt. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Vasquez, his tone steady but tinged with concern. "We're receiving a message from the lead cruiser. They've initiated their testing protocol. They want us to demonstrate the eclipse's capabilities before they take any further action." Elena nodded, her face a mask of concentration. "Prepare for the test, Lieutenant. Make sure the systems are running at full capacity." As she turned to give further orders, she caught a glimpse of the holographic map that displayed the layout of the HFY system. In the distance, the Council fleet formed a large ring, each ship stationed far enough apart to avoid collateral damage in the event of a conflict. It was clear that the Council wasn't taking any chances. They had come here not just to observe, but to test their theories. Many had openly questioned if the eclipse was more than just a threat of humanity's potential. It was a challenge to the established power balance of the galaxy. The eclipse's engines hummed to life as the ship's core powered up. The silence of the void was suddenly pierced by a deep, resonant sound, the deep thrum of raw power surging through the ship. Elena gripped the armrests of her command chair, her fingers tightening with anticipation. Initiating warp calculation, Lieutenant Vasquez announced, "We will begin with a short jump to test the ship's range and speed." Elena didn't respond, her focus entirely on the task ahead. The ship's engines roared as space itself bent and twisted around them. Within a fraction of a second, the eclipse was gone, disappearing from view as though it had never been there. The distant stars seemed to stretch, their light blurring into streaks of blue and white as the ship's unique warp technology kicked in. The Council ships were left staring at empty space, bewildered, as the eclipse jumped forward in an instant, faster than any ship had ever moved before. The eclipse reappeared in the blink of an eye, its sleek hull appearing like a shadow, out of place in the vastness of the system. A few of the observing Council ships shuddered as their sensors were disrupted by the sudden appearance of the ship. They had never seen anything like this before. No engine flare, No exhaust, just the quiet, cold efficiency of a ship that moved like a shadow. Before the Council ships could react, Elena gave the command. The Eclipse did not need to rely on traditional weapons systems. Instead, it manipulated the very fabric of space around it. With a single, swift motion, the ship's core pulsed with energy, sending out a wave of distortion through the surrounding space. The Vespers, the lead Council ship, tried to lock onto the Eclipse with its advanced targeting systems. But before the weapons could fire, the ship was gone, reappearing just behind the Vespers at point-blank range. Engaging the disruption field, Elena said coolly, though her mind raced. The Vespers' shields flickered in an attempt to brace for the inevitable impact. But there would be no impact. The Eclipse wasn't about direct attack, it was about control. With a pulse from the Eclipse's core, space around the Vespers began to warp. Time itself seemed to slow for the Council ship, as though we're moving through a thick, invisible fog. The Vespers' advanced weapons systems sputtered and flickered, unable to get a clear lock on the Eclipse. Elena knew the Vespers was now trapped, its systems in disarray, caught in a temporal anomaly that twisted their perception of time. "Captain, their engines are down," Vasquez reported. They're stuck in a time loop. It's like their systems are moving forward, then snapping back in place." Elena didn't smile. She couldn't afford to show any weakness. "Maintain the field," she ordered. "Don't release the pressure until I say so." The Eclipse held the Vespers in a silent grip, its systems rendered useless by the strange manipulation of time. The Vespers' crew could only watch in helpless frustration as their ship struggled against an enemy it couldn't understand. Meanwhile, the remaining Council ships remained passive, unable to intervene without risking their own damage. But Elena knew that they weren't finished yet. This was only the first test, and the Council would not be easily impressed. They wanted to see the Eclipse's full potential, wanted to know if this was a one-time trick or if humanity truly had the means to challenge the galaxy's most powerful species. At that moment, another ship, a smaller, faster vessel from the Tsarovians, drew closer, its sleek form cutting through space like a knife. Elena's eyes narrowed. She had been expecting this. The Tsarovians, always quick to challenge anything they saw as a threat, were already on the move. The Council's fleet remained still, uncertain of what to do, but the Tsarovians would waste no time. Their warships were known for their speed and agility, and they would test the Eclipse with their own brand of brutality. "Get ready," Elena murmured, her hands steady on the controls. "They're not going to wait for us to make the next move. We'll show them exactly what this ship can do." With a sudden surge, the Tsarovian ship launched forward, its energy weapons flashing. The Eclipse responded immediately. Without a second to lose, it warped again, reappearing just above the Tsarovian vessel. Before the Tsarovian ship could even react, a burst of energy shot from the Eclipse, not from any visible weapon, but from the very core of the ship. The blast was silent and deadly. The Tsarovian ship's shields collapsed instantly, leaving the vessel vulnerable. The attack didn't destroy it, but it rendered it immobile, its systems short-circuited. The Council watched in stunned silence. The Eclipse had shown them something they couldn't explain, something they hadn't even begun to understand. But Elena knew this was only the beginning. The first test had been passed, but the real challenge was still ahead. If humanity was going to truly claim its place in the galaxy, they would have to prove themselves time and time again. And the next test was coming faster than anyone could predict. The moment the Eclipse disabled the Tsarovian warship, the Council chamber erupted into chaos. The Council representatives from across the galaxy could not believe what they had just witnessed. The Tsarovian ship, one of the fastest, most powerful vessels in the galaxy, had been rendered useless in a blink of an eye. The calm efficiency with which Captain Elena Cross had executed the maneuver left no room for doubt. The Eclipse was a game-changer. But while the Council's shock was palpable, the Tsarovians were furious. They had been humiliated, and their pride would not let it go unchallenged. As the Tsarovian ships lingered in the distance, their crews in disarray, a new transmission was received by the Eclipse. The face that appeared on the screen was cold and calculating. The eyes of the Tsarovian leader, Admiral Rax, narrowed in anger. His voice was icy as he addressed Elena. "You have proven your ship's power, Captain Cross," Admiral Rax began, his words deliberate, "but you have also insulted the might of the Zerovian fleet. If you think for one moment that we will allow this humiliation to go unpunished, you are gravely mistaken. We will have our revenge, and we will not be alone. The entire galaxy will know what your human ship can do, and they will come for you." Elena's face remained impassive as she listened. This was what she had feared the moment when the Council's curiosity turned to hostility, when the galaxy's most powerful species would seek to tear down humanity's place in the stars. She knew that this was not just a challenge from one race. It was a declaration of war from all the forces that had always seen humanity as insignificant. Now, they were going to make sure humanity knew exactly where they stood in the galaxy. As the transmission ended, the room fell into a thick silence. The crew aboard the Eclipse exchanged uneasy glances. Elena had expected some form of retaliation, but she hadn't anticipated this immediate shift in attitude. The Zerovians were not the only ones who would take issue with the Eclipse's display of power. Already, rumors were spreading throughout the galaxy, reaching every corner of the galaxy's civilizations. The Eclipse had forced a change in the balance of power, and the established order would not tolerate it. "Captain," Lieutenant Vasquez spoke up, his voice tense. "The Zerovians are assembling their fleet. We've intercepted several communications they're calling for reinforcements. It won't be long before other forces arrive." Elena nodded, her mind racing. She had known this was coming. The Zerovians wouldn't simply accept defeat, they would rally the rest of the galaxy's major powers. This was no longer just about the Eclipse. This was about humanity's survival. "We're not backing down," Elena said, her voice firm. "Prepare the ship. We're going to make sure the galaxy knows exactly what humanity can do." As the crew moved swiftly to prepare for the coming battle, Elena stepped away from the command center. She moved to the observation deck, gazing out at the stars, her thoughts turning inward. How had it come to this? Humanity had built the Eclipse not to wage war, but to protect itself. The galaxy had always looked at humans as a lesser race, an upstart species that had no place in the great schemes of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Yet here they were, with a ship capable of challenging those very civilizations. But power came with a price. The warning from the Zerovians was clear. This would not end with one skirmish. The galaxy would unite against humanity, and if the Eclipse was to survive, it would need more than just technology, it would need allies. Elena's mind turned to the Council. They had witnessed the Eclipse's power, but she had not missed the skepticism in their eyes. The humans had made an impression, but was it enough? Would the Council, in its wisdom, intervene to keep the peace, or would they sit back and watch humanity face the wrath of the galaxy? The uncertainty was a weight on her shoulders. Just then, Vasquez approached, breaking Elena from her thoughts. "Captain, we've detected an incoming fleet," he said, his voice urgent. "It's not just the Zerovians. The fleets of the Andurians, the Xanthar, and the Syrinx are converging on our position. They are coming for us, Captain. This is no longer a challenge. It's an alliance against humanity." Elena felt her blood run cold. The Andurians, the Xanthar, and the Syrinx, these were some of the most feared and ancient races in the galaxy. Each had a vast fleet of warships, each with their own deadly technologies. Together, they represented a force far greater than anything humanity had ever faced. But Elena wasn't about to back down. She had led her people to this point, and she wouldn't let them fall now. "We need to make contact with the Council immediately," she ordered. "We need reinforcements, and we need them now." Vasquez nodded and turned to relay the command. Meanwhile, Elena returned to the command center, where the Eclipse's tactical map flickered to life. The approaching fleets were closing in fast. If they didn't act now, humanity's ship would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. "Prepare the Eclipse for battle," Elena ordered, her voice resolute. "We will hold our ground, but we will also send a message. We are not afraid to fight for our place in the stars." With her command, the crew went to work, preparing the ship's systems for combat. The Eclipse was not designed to fight in the traditional sense. It didn't rely on conventional weapons like missiles or energy blasts. but its true strength lay in its ability to manipulate space itself, to bend the very fabric of reality. It was a ship like no other, and if the galaxy wanted a war, the Eclipse would give it to them on its own terms. As the seconds ticked by, Elena stood at the helm, her eyes locked on the stars ahead. She knew that this was only the beginning. The challenge had been thrown, and humanity could not afford to back down. The galaxy's most powerful forces had united against them, but Elena wasn't about to let humanity's future be decided by anyone but themselves. "We will fight," Elena murmured to herself, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "And we will show them what humanity is capable of." The first shots rang out as the enemy fleets engaged, and the Eclipse was ready. This was the moment of truth, the moment that would define whether humanity would rise or fall. The challenge had been made, and now it was time to face it head-on. The vastness of space seemed even more intimidating as the enemy fleets closed in on the Eclipse. The dark expanse around them was filled with the distant gleam of enemy warships, some sleek and deadly like the Zerovians' vessels, others massive and imposing like the Andurians' battlecruisers. Elena stood at the helm, her mind racing as she watched the tactical map flicker to life. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she wasn't about to show any fear. Humanity had already made its stand, and now it was time to prove that they had the strength to fight, to win, and to survive. "Captain," Lieutenant Vasquez said, his voice tight with urgency, "the enemy fleets are in range. We have incoming fire from the Zarovians. They're making the first move." Elena didn't flinch. "Hold position," she ordered, her voice calm and steady. "We'll make the first strike." For the first time since the Zerovians had arrived, Elena allowed herself a brief moment to consider just how much humanity had to lose. This wasn't just a battle for the Eclipse. This was the beginning of a new chapter for the human race, and it could very well be the end of their dream to carve a place for themselves in the stars. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and every decision from here on out would count. The enemy ships fired their first salvo, a barrage of energy beams and missiles that raced through space with terrifying speed. They were aimed directly at the Eclipse, a clear signal that the galaxy's most powerful races weren't interested in negotiations anymore. But the Eclipse was no ordinary ship. As the blasts neared, Elena spoke the command that would change everything. "Activate the warp field." The ship's engines roared to life, and in the blink of an eye, the Eclipse vanished, its powerful warp drive distorting space around it. The incoming fire missed by mere inches, the explosions rippling across the space where the ship had been just moments before. When the Eclipse reappeared, it was now right in the middle of the enemy formation, too close for any of the ships to avoid the incoming strike. "Target the lead Zerovian cruiser," Elena said, her eyes never leaving the battle ahead. "Prepare for a direct attack." The crew moved quickly, working in perfect unison. The Eclipse's core hummed, and with a single, coordinated pulse, the ship sent a wave of distorted energy directly at the Zerovian cruiser. The shockwave rippled through space, causing the Zerovian ship's shields to flicker and collapse. The cruiser's systems sputtered as the energy wave tore through its defenses, rendering it helpless. The Eclipse wasn't done. With one final pulse, the cruiser was pushed back, its momentum halted, its weapons offline. The once proud ship now drifted in space, crippled and powerless. "Direct hit, Captain," Vasquez reported, his voice tinged with awe. "The Zarovian cruiser is disabled." But Elena knew better than to celebrate. The Zerovians were just the beginning. The other fleets were closing in, their ships moving in perfect formation, preparing to retaliate. And that was when the true test would come. "Brace for impact," Elena shouted as the enemy ships launched another round of fire, this time with even greater force. The Eclipse was caught in the storm of beams and missiles, but it wasn't the Eclipse's shields that Elena trusted. It was the ship's ability to manipulate space itself. With another command, the ship's engines surged, and the Eclipse leapt to the side just as the enemy fire reached its previous position. The blasts sailed harmlessly into space, missing their target entirely. But the enemy wasn't backing down. The Andurians, with their massive battlecruisers, were closing in fast, their weapons powered up. The Syrinx fleet, known for their speed and precision, was flanking the Eclipse, preparing to strike from all angles. The battle was turning into a deadly dance, with the Eclipse in the center, trying to stay one step ahead of its opponents. But every second brought them closer to a decisive moment. "We're being surrounded," Lieutenant Vasquez warned. "If we don't break through soon, we'll be caught in a trap." Elena's mind raced. They had to act quickly, or they would be overwhelmed by the sheer number of ships closing in. The Eclipse wasn't built for prolonged battles, it was built for swift, precise strikes. If they didn't take the offensive now, they would lose their advantage. "Activate the quantum disruption field," Elena commanded. "We need to disrupt their targeting systems." The Eclipse's core powered up once again, the ship vibrating as the quantum field activated. A ripple spread through space, distorting the very fabric of reality around the approaching enemy fleets. Suddenly, the Andurian and Syrinx ships found their sensors flickering and failing. Their weapons locked onto empty space as the Eclipse danced between their positions, faster than they could track. "Now!" Elena shouted. The crew sprang into action. The Eclipse surged forward, appearing behind the Andurian battlecruiser. Before it could react, a precise strike of distortion energy disabled its engines, sending the massive ship into a slow, spiraling drift. It was no longer a threat. The Syrinx ships tried to adjust, but they were too slow. One by one, they too were caught in the Eclipse's field and rendered helpless, their shields flickering as they were torn apart by the intense gravitational forces. But the battle wasn't over yet. The remaining Zerovian ships had reorganized, their focus now solely on the Eclipse. A new transmission crackled through the speakers, and once again, Admiral Rax's face appeared on the screen. But this time, his expression was different. There was no arrogance, no anger, only cold determination. "You are strong, human," Rax said, his voice measured. "But this will not end here. You've humiliated us, and you've shown the galaxy your power. But we are not so easily defeated. Prepare yourselves for what is to come." Elena stood silent for a moment, her fingers clenched tightly around the armrests of her chair. She could feel the weight of Rax's words. The battle wasn't over, and it wasn't going to be won with one strike. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see if humanity could rise to the challenge and hold its ground. But Elena was not afraid. She had seen what the Eclipse was capable of, and she knew that humanity had something that the other fleets did not, the will to fight for their future. She would not let their place in the stars be decided by anyone but themselves. "Keep fighting," Elena said, her voice steady, her eyes filled with determination. "We fight for humanity, for the future we deserve. This battle is ours to win." And as the battle raged on, the Eclipse's engines roared, and the crew of the human ship stood ready to face whatever came next. The showdown had only just begun, and the galaxy would never forget the power of humanity's resolve. The battle had raged for hours. The Eclipse had become a blur of movement in the chaos of combat, its hull dancing between enemy fire and enemy ships, bending the very fabric of space to dodge and strike with precision. But despite the overwhelming numbers and the incredible firepower aimed at them from all sides, the ship and its crew had endured. Every blow that should have destroyed them had been avoided. Every trap that should have caught them had been evaded. Humanity had proven something fundamental, that they were not to be underestimated. Now, as the final remnants of the enemy fleets drifted in space, defeated and broken, Elena Cross stood tall at the command center, her mind still sharp but her body exhausted. Her fingers hovered over the console, watching as the last of the Zerovian ships vanished into the darkness of space, their engines either disabled or too damaged to continue fighting. The battle was over, but the war, the true fight for humanity's future, was just beginning. "Captain," Vasquez called out, his voice a mixture of disbelief and awe, "we've done it. The enemy forces are in full retreat. The Zerovians, the Syrinx, the Andurians, they're all pulling back. We've won." Elena looked around at her crew. They were battered, tired, but their faces showed nothing but pride. The Eclipse had become more than just a ship. It had become a symbol, a shining beacon of humanity's defiance. They had taken on the galaxy's most powerful forces and had come out on top. But the victory was not without its cost. There were still many battles to be fought, many who who would see humanity's rise as a threat, and many more who would try to tear them down. "The battle's over, yes," Elena said, her voice calm, though her mind was already racing ahead. "But the war for our future is just beginning. This victory is not the end. It's only the first step." "Captain," Vasquez replied, "the Council wants to speak to you. They're sending a transmission now." Elena nodded and moved to the communication terminal, her thoughts a swirl of uncertainty. The Council had witnessed the battle from afar, from the safety of their stations, but now they would have to confront the reality of what humanity had done. Would they see this victory as a new era for humankind, or would they fear what it meant for the galaxy's power structure? The screen flickered, and soon the faces of the Council members appeared. The room fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. At the center of the screen, Councillor Kaldar, the representative of the Andurian species, was the first to speak. His expression was unreadable. "Captain Cross," Kaldar began, his voice steady but edged with tension, "you have proven the power of humanity today. You have shown the galaxy that you are not to be trifled with. But I must ask, what is it you seek? You have earned the right to exist, but the actions you have taken today have shifted the balance of power across the galaxy. Where do you stand now?" Elena's heart pounded in her chest. This was the moment when everything could change. She could feel the eyes of the galaxy on her, waiting to see what humanity would do next. Would they fight for survival, or would they fall into the chaos that had consumed so many before them? "We stand for peace," Elena replied, her voice unwavering. "We fought because we were forced to, because our future was being threatened. But we will not become the aggressors. Our people will not seek domination. We seek cooperation. We want to build a new order, a fairer, more balanced galaxy. One where all species have a voice, and where no race is enslaved by another's will." There was a long silence, and Elena could see the shift in the Council's faces. Some of them remained stoic, others wary. But there was a glimmer of something in their eyes. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just curiosity. "You speak of a new order, Captain," Councillor T. Raza, the Syrinx representative, said, her voice laced with skepticism. "But do you truly believe that such a thing is possible? The galaxy has been ruled by power for millennia. It is not so easy to change." "We are not here to change the galaxy overnight," Elena answered, her gaze strong and resolute. "But we are here to start a movement. We are here to prove that the strength of a species is not only in its weapons, but in its unity, its compassion, and in its resolve to build a better future." Councillor Kaldar's gaze softened slightly, and he nodded. "Perhaps you are right, Captain. Humanity's actions today have changed the course of history. Perhaps it is time for a new way. We will consider your words." The transmission ended, and Elena felt a weight lift from her chest. But it was only temporary. The Council's response was one of hesitation, not acceptance. They were not yet ready to embrace humanity's vision of a new order. The galaxy was a complex web of politics, power struggles, and ancient rivalries. Humanity's victory today may have been a turning point. "Elena," Vasquez said, breaking her thoughts, "we're receiving transmissions from the other fleets. The word is spreading across the galaxy. The Zorovians are already regrouping, but they're not coming back. Instead, they're calling for peace talks. The Syrinx and Andurians, too. It looks like the battle we fought today has forced them to reconsider their position." Elena's eyes narrowed. The galaxy was reeling from their loss, but the peace talks weren't the end. This was their opportunity to set the stage for what was to come. They had shown the galaxy what they were capable of, but now they would have to prove their strength in diplomacy. They would need to forge alliances and convince those who doubted humanity's intentions that their vision for the future was one worth supporting. "This is our chance," Elena said, her voice filled with purpose. "We've shown them that we won't back down. But now we need to show them that we can lead not with weapons, but with wisdom." The crew of the Eclipse stood together, their pride and their mission clear in their eyes. They had fought for humanity's survival, but the true fight would take place in the councils and halls of power. This was not just a victory in battle, It was a victory for a future where humanity had a place among the stars. As the Eclipse sailed through the vastness of space, heading toward the first of many peace talks, Elena Cross allowed herself a small, quiet smile. They had won, but the true challenge was still ahead of them. The galaxy had been shaken by their strength, but now it was time to build something new, a new order, where humanity would not just survive, but thrive. And as the stars stretched out before them, Elena knew this was just the beginning. The future was theirs to shape,